What if you found out that an important American institution and your taxes were going to the state-run Chinese organizations and our geopolitical foe? Well, that's what we're going to get into with, of course, new information coming from U.S. Senator Mike Lee, as, of course, the talks are heating up about a trade war between China and the United States. And before we get into Mike Lee's comments, first of all, stocks are getting hit negatively in the market right now because of these trade war worries. We're seeing the White House ratchet up the trade fight, as allegedly it was China that broke a promise for a trade deal, which left Donald Trump sending out a public tweet that said, quote, "The United States has been losing for many years $600 to $800 billion a year on trade. With China, we lose $500 billion. Sorry, we're not going to be doing that anymore." And this leads to, of course, a very looming decision of many people expecting more tariffs, more taxes, higher products, and, of course, economic calamity. Will that happen? We don't know. But there's a bigger issue to get into that, of course, this U.S. Senator brings up that, of course, should be a part of the discussion, but it's not. The discussion right now is literally Chuck Schumer and Donald Trump agreeing on raising taxes and tariffs. But Mike Lee really does bring up really excellent points. Jason, you found this video. Let's introduce it here.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, there is an export-import bank that was set up during the Great Depression that was supposed to be for small businesses. Now, through years and years of corruption and semantics and fooling with the vernacular, you find out that no, actually this benefits not only big corporations, but state-run institutions in other governments. So I'm going to let Mike Lee, who has really grown on me as a senator, has done some really good stuff, take it from here, and then we'll explain a little further.
Many Americans might be surprised, shocked, and troubled to learn that some of their tax dollars are going directly to Chinese companies, and that some of those dollars even go to corporations owned by the Chinese government, like Chinese banks, Chinese.
Jason, there's an important distinction. There's no real kind of capitalism. It's a quasi-capitalism, communistic system in China where big, large corporations exist with government, with compliance of them, and of course, outside competitors are tariffed very highly. It's very hard to get into the Chinese market, which again, the corporate and allegedly private and public entities are pretty much essentially one, where they work towards the better benefit of the country in large. So there is no real free market capitalism. The government has its hands in major industries, if not all of the industries, in many sinister ways in China, which I need to kind of clarify here as Mike Lee talks.
Well, you know, other than China, I just want to explain to people, it's through subsidy programs and banks and institutions like this one that make it possible for the Googles, the Apples, and the Amazons of the world not to pay any taxes. That's how it works. So let's continue here because, again, Mike Lee is talking about how your tax dollars are going to institutions and banks run by the Chinese government.
Development agencies and Chinese microprocessor factories. In recent years, in fact, China received $50 million in loans and guarantees, all backed by American citizens. Taxpayers would be right to be puzzled and concerned about why their hard-earned money is subsidizing Chinese state-owned companies. Now, to be clear, we're not talking about voluntary investment from American businesses. We're talking about the backing of the United States government.
Let's stop it right there. Think about that. The backing of the United States government. So, folks, we're so heavily intertwined with China right now. Like he talked about, microprocessing factories, banks. This is globalization. This is the plan. And although there is a certain vying for domination of that globalist one world order we've all talked about for years and years and years, I totally believe that. I don't think everybody's like, oh, I want a new world order. No, a lot of people want to be at the top of the next world order that is obviously heavily invested in globalism and intertwined finances. This is what's happening, Luke.
Yeah, we have to understand this is so intertwined. I mean, there's a huge influx of Chinese citizens moving to the United States, buying up property everywhere. That created a huge boom, a huge frenzy, what some people are calling it in the market here. And of course, people are saying that this is also a big danger, and of course, also saying that this is unfair. We have to understand here the bigger point that people need to understand when we're talking about private enterprise. There is no private enterprise in China. If a corporation does something, it's going to be towards the benefit of the state. Any competitor trying to come outside needs to work with the Chinese government one-on-one, so the Chinese government makes sure that all business practices may benefit the government, and of course screw over all the other competitors. And that's why we're seeing this situation unfold. But $50 million, kind of a, it's a lot, but holy cow, the numbers are a lot bigger when we look at the trade deficits and the actual economic numbers that people should realize here. But let's keep it going.
Well, actually, I wanted to talk about, because he starts talking about the Export-Import Bank and how it started. I want to talk about the other export from China, and it's the surveillance state. And, we've been talking about this for some time, Luke, but there's this new article on The Guardian where a journalist describes how he was in China trying to interview journalists about the state of the nation there. And he was...
I don't think the 80s. I think it was in 2005, he writes here.
Oh,
he
you're
talks
right.
about how he was going from Shanghai to Hangzhou, and the Chinese secret police were following him because he set up an interview with other fellow Chinese writers and journalists, and he talked about how the cars were following him, stopping when they were about to overtake him, swerving on his road, on his way there, how the writers that he was going to interview were specifically detained and questioned. And he said that this was 15 years ago. And he brings up an important thing. He was like, well, the Chinese surveillance capabilities have increased immensely, and they become so sophisticated. Now they wouldn't need to tell you in a car dangerously in traffic. All they have to do is put you in a computer database system, say track, trace, and database him. And they could also automatically, if there's a writer that meets with an American that doesn't want information going out there to America, they could just take away all of his banking resources. They could take away his privileges to travel. They could take away his privileges for his family to go to a proper school or have a good house, live in a good neighborhood. They could do so much more than what they were just doing before on this level. But this is a terrifying story here, Jason.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, he talks about, the past, and now they just ban journalists and they ban platforms like Twitter altogether. So according to Amnesty International, China has the largest number of cyber dissidents and journalists in prison. That's a fact. And they have a rising social credit score that's already in place in major cities there, and they want to take nationwide. And this reporter is basically saying that's coming here through the fact that we are so much involved in China. China and the United States, although, again, we're at odds in some things, we've come together. Think about what we've exported, Luke, over the last 30 years. They got their blue jeans and their McDonald's and their KFCs, right? Their pseudo-capitalism. And what have we got from them? Their technology and their slave labor. And now they've built up an economy that's so great with that slave labor. They're not just second world. They're on the verge of being first world and the leading economy in the world. At the same time, their military prowess has grown and grown again. And they've made allegiances outside of the United States as well. We know this with Russia, who, we've been in some proxy wars with recently. So a lot of this is extremely alarming, but when they import this type of surveillance technology, and when we look at that model, that social credit score model coming here, you have to be frightened.
Yeah, I've been saying China is the test run. China is the frog in the pot with the water boiling when it comes to personal, individual liberty, sovereignty, and freedom, with governments track, trace, and databasing and telling you what is good for you, controlling almost every aspect of your life. China is on the forefront of the next modern human enslavement that they're conditioning their public and rolling out to their public as we are speaking right now in many terrifying, absolutely insane ways that makes many statists, government-loving officials, usually big government ninnies out there, salivate and be excited because of the possibilities that this huge government system could have over its population. The article here reads, worse, the Chinese model is now being exported. Wired magazine has reported that China is exporting its technology dystopian model to other countries. Since January 2017, Freedom House counted 38 countries where Chinese firms have built internet infrastructure and 18 countries using AI surveillance developed by the Chinese. This is rolling out on a huge, large scale. And if the world sees the Chinese getting away with this, of course, this is going to set the dangerous precedent. It's going to be set everywhere else, and it's terrifying. And this bank that Mike Lee brings up, like, why is this happening? This makes absolutely no sense. We're getting one aspect of this on the news, but I don't see anybody else but Mike Lee, who doesn't get a lot of media attention that we were talking about before, the one who's mainly talking about these specific issues, which are important issues to bring up when it comes to the bigger problems that are laid out between China and the United States on the world stage, Jason.
Yeah, the media is going to focus in on Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell talking about the Mueller report. Instead, I'm going to focus in on real news and things that actually matter and that aren't part of some partisan war imagination land. And again, I think that's why independent media is so important. If we adopt that Chinese model, and things like Twitter aren't even allowed to exist, and the few journalists that were able to get around it with VPNs and such get snuffed out in the respects that either their social credit score goes down or worse, they are one of those political dissidents that goes to prison. Well, that's not the kind of world I want to live in. And again, when they're exporting that technology across the world in the West, Luke, we have to be very alarmed.
Well, VPNs can't always protect you, since there's many what people call honey trap VPNs established by government forces in order to even watch you even more closely. And China has been cracking down on VPNs and making it more and more difficult for people to even know what's happening outside of the tightly controlled system that they have in place there. So more terrifying news, especially with the shutdown of many VPN companies, the shutdown of the availability of VPN companies, and pretty much criminalizing information, criminalizing you thinking. We're seeing that on a quasi corporate state level with, of course, the latest actions by Facebook, by Twitter here. It's happening by a complete state level in China. But these are dangerous times, and we need more information dealing with this larger situation, which sadly shows no sign of unfolding and only getting worse from here. That's my opinion. Anything else you want to say, Jason, or should we close it off here?
Yeah, folks, we are doing 4 videos a day across 2 separate platforms. News for a change, and We Are Change. Make sure you are subscribed to both, ringing that bell, sharing it on social media, but most importantly, guys, getting out there and being the change you want to see in the world.